So, here we are, at the final chapter of our economics series. And today, we're diving into a topic that affects every single one of us. We're not just talking about buying and selling. We're talking about a real transformation, the journey of the consumer from being, well, pretty vulnerable in the marketplace to becoming a truly empowered citizen. This isn't just about economics. It's about our rights in a democracy.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down today. First, we'll look at the consumer's place in the market, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Then, we'll see how a powerful social movement was born from all this. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the law that changed everything, COPRA. We'll even walk through the actual steps you can take to get justice. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see how this makes us all more aware and empowered citizens.
Okay, let's kick things off by talking about the consumer in the market. You know, we all participate in this space. We're all buyers, and sometimes we're sellers. But let's be honest, the power isn't always balanced, is it? It's often a pretty uneven playing field.
I mean, markets are the heart of our economy, no doubt about it. But they can also be places where consumers get a raw deal. We're talking about everything from being overcharged to being sold low-quality goods, or even worse, things that are downright dangerous.
Now, this is a really tough story, but it's so important. Take the case of Reggie Matthew, a healthy boy who went in for a medical procedure, but because of negligence, his life was changed forever. This is more than just a personal tragedy. It's a powerful, sobering reminder of the serious risks consumers can face and exactly why we need strong laws to protect us. And you know, what happened to Reggie wasn't a one-off thing. Not at all. Stories like his were symptoms of a much bigger problem, and eventually, people decided they'd had enough. That brings us to our next section, how all these individual struggles grew into a massive, nationwide movement for change.
So, to really get this, we have to go back to the 1960s and 70s in India. It was a tough time. There were major food shortages, which, as you can imagine, led to some really unethical stuff like hoarding and black marketing. The food you could get was often adulterated, mixed with things it shouldn't be, which was a huge health risk. And on top of all that, there was basically no legal system to protect regular people from this stuff. It was out of this frustration that consumer groups started popping up, demanding that someone be held accountable.
And all that pressure, all that organizing, it actually worked. It led to something huge. In a move that was pretty groundbreaking for its time, India set up special courts just for consumer issues. This was a massive win, a real landmark moment that showed the government was finally starting to take consumer protection seriously.
So this huge win was made official in a really important law. Let's move on to Section 3 and break down COPRA, the legal shield that every single consumer in India now has.
The Consumer Protection Act of 1986, or COPRA as it's known, was a total game changer. Its main goal was simple: protect consumers. And how did it do that? By creating a special three-level system of consumer courts at the district, state, and national levels. This made getting justice way more accessible for the average person.
Now, COPRA gives us some fundamental rights. First up, the right to safety. This is absolutely crucial. Think about something as common as a pressure cooker. If that little safety valve on top is defective, it can literally explode. This right is what protects you from products and services that could harm you or your property.
Next, we have the right to be informed. You actually see this one in action every single time you go shopping. You know all that information on the back of a package? The MRP, the list of ingredients, the manufacturing and expiry dates? That's all because of this right. It gives you the power to make smart choices before you spend your money.
But wait, there's more. COPRA gives you a whole arsenal of rights. You have the right to choose, which protects you from monopolies. You have the right to seek redressal, which is your right to get compensation if you've been wronged. And so importantly, you have the right to represent, which means your voice has to be heard in the right places.
So, how can you use this in your daily life? Well, here's a pro tip. Look for the mark. When you're buying stuff, keep an eye out for logos like the ISI mark on electronics or the AG mark on food items. These little logos are your guarantee that the product meets certain quality standards.
Okay, so it's great to have all these rights on paper. But what happens when things actually go wrong? How do you fight for them? That's what our fourth section is all about, the practical path to getting justice.
Let's walk through a real-world example. Meet Prakash. He sent a money order to his daughter for her wedding. Super important, right? But the money never got there. Now, he could have just accepted the loss, but he didn't. He took action and filed a case in his local district consumer court.
And this is the key part. These consumer forums, they're not like those intimidating old-school courts you see in movies. They're designed to be accessible to everyone. Prakash could just walk in and file his complaint without needing to be some kind of legal genius.
And get this, Prakash argued his own case. He didn't need a high-priced lawyer. The whole process is simplified so that an ordinary citizen can stand up and explain what happened. And in the end, the court listened and the Postal Department was held responsible. That's justice in action.
You see, what Prakash did wasn't just about getting his money back. It was an act of engaged citizenship. And that brings us to our final section, where we see how being an aware consumer really makes you an empowered citizen.
In this idea of being informed, it doesn't just stop with the products you buy. It got even bigger in 2005 with the Right to Information Act, or RTI. This is another incredibly powerful law that lets any citizen ask for information about how government departments work. It's all about transparency and holding the system accountable, just like with consumer rights. At the end of the day, laws like COPRA and RTI are just tools. They're powerful for sure, but they're only as effective as the citizens who actually use them. Awareness is everything. Knowing your rights, and just as importantly, taking responsibility when you make a purchase. That is what turns a simple transaction into an act of being a responsible citizen. So, as we wrap all this up, I want to leave you with a few things to think about. First, why exactly was COPRA such a revolutionary, game-changing law for Indian consumers? Second, how does a law like the RTI Act make our consumer rights even stronger? And finally, think about yourself. What is your role? How does just being an aware, alert consumer help create a fair market for absolutely everyone? Thanks for joining me on this journey.